I think we'll just give people a minute or two to kind of wrap up from the previous session. So, just taking 2 minutes before we start into the presentation. I know that, everybody, it's just before lunch. I know everybody would want to take a quick break. So, the objective of, Chambers of Jai Shri Murli being here today is to basically tell people who are coming to this exhibition, especially investors, whether they're foreign or Indian, that one of the big roadblocks or, the kind of demon in people's mind is that, legal complications, because people don't understand. It's an area that is like a big, nobody wants to go down that thing, like, hospitals, police stations, lawyers. You don't want to go down that path. So the reason why we thought, and therefore we'd like to start off by giving thanking the organizers for giving us an opportunity to address this crowd for 20 minutes to basically convey the message that India is actually a very investor-friendly country. If you have the right kind of people and the right kind of advisors and you have the correct information, we are actually very, very investor friendly. We are very, business can be very smooth, right? So, yeah, I see that, people have kind of settled in. So, very quickly, this is the idea is to keep it for 20 minutes. I'm watching the clock, so hopefully I will remain within that budget. I started off by, telling you all why we are here. So the first thing that I'd like to start off with before we get the PPT, are we getting the PPT? Yeah, great. Yes, so I'd like to start by telling you all who we are, because I think it's very important that you know who's speaking to you, who are you listening to, right? So Chambers of Jai Shri Murli is actually a boutique law firm, and what we mean by that is that we are, a boutique law firm is somebody who specializes in a particular area of law as opposed to, a full service law firm. So Chambers of Jai Shri Murli actually specializes in corporate law. What does that mean? It basically means anything and everything that relates to companies, to limited liability partnerships. Basically, we are a business transaction law firm. And by that, what that also means is that we handle, or our experience is basically in setting up companies all the way through the lifespan of companies to, if, God forbid, there are disputes as far as companies are concerned. We're a small team, very dynamic team, but we're headed by a lady who has almost 4 decades of experience. She started practicing in Bangalore much before, the Indian economy opened up. So even though we're small, it's a very compact team, very dynamic, and there's plenty of experience right from before India was, deregulated to how it's operating now. So we've seen both ends of, the so-called the legal aspects of running a business in India. Now, I'd like to, from talking about who we are, I'd like to move into why we should be looking at India. And I think most of us here, I don't think we need to be told why, but I think the answer, more than what has been put up on the slide, I would like to focus on the front page of the newspaper yesterday and today. Our GDP numbers, 8.4. Today, front page basically said our BSE and Sensex is showing figures that's bringing cheer to everybody, right? So we are the investment destination. 3 years, 4 years back, when people were talking about recession, India was the one bright star. So I don't think we need to go beyond that in terms of why we should be looking at India as an investment sector, why you should look at investment in India. But yes, the broad, pointers that we have kind of put together to kind of, address the key points is we are the fifth largest economy. We are looking at a 5 trillion mark target as far as, the government is concerned. That's the target. We've got significant resources. Talent pool is not a problem. Skilled, technical, you name the kind of manpower. We have that kind of manpower. We have a manufacturing and a production sector which is growing. Most importantly, we have a lot of government support in terms of policy. We have the Make in India, which is a huge thrust. And then we have this Atmanirbhar Bharat, which again is a huge thrust as far as the government is concerned to, make things Indian. right? So we have the policy support and, the ease of doing business in India. The last point I don't think is reflecting because of the chairs, but the point is basically that we've moved up in the ease of doing business index. Now, even though we might not be in a position that, we would like to be, the point is a lot of the difficulties can be taken care of if your documentation and a lot of the other thought processes is planned well ahead, before you actually get into doing the business. Yes, that's what I thought. Yeah. Sorry. No, not at all. Thank you. This is just a kind of chart that we put together to talk about the Indian elevator and escalator market. What we are expecting it to grow by, look, the numbers speak for themselves. I don't think any explanation is required. But, the fact that we are having this kind of an exhibition this is the reason, right? So now, from India, we thought we'd take a couple of minutes to talk about why the elevator and escalator sector and why we're looking at investment out here. And why somebody should be investing, why you should be looking at, making those kind of business decisions. Point number one is our population growth. Along with the population growth, it's not just population growth, we have economic growth. So what does that mean? When we are having economic growth, we have hospitals coming up, we have roads coming up, we have government basically throwing its weight behind Indian infrastructure. That's been happening for some time. In Bangalore itself, we have these metro, just for those of us who've traveled in from the city, the metro that's come up next to IKEA, these are infrastructure impetus that require mobility. So there's a huge potential, huge market, and we have modernization of railways, we are looking at increasing number of office spaces, we have Blackstone that brings in, it's talking about, like, Blackstone is a private equity investor, which is basically, its main thrust in India is in the real estate sector. That just shows how much of potential there is. And obviously, if you're talking, the minute you're talking about real estate, whether it is commercial space, whether you're talking about retail space, whether you're talking about housing, all of those things we can't imagine without an escalator or an elevator or some kind of a mobility solution, especially given the fact that a lot of our population, as they grow older, you have people who have moved abroad, you have NRIs, you have expats who come down to our country at the time when, the weather is bad there or, when it's really cold. So, as you grow older, you can't, the one big luxury is to have an escalator and an elevator. You're not going to be climbing upstairs, right? So, already touched upon government impetus and public awareness. There's a lot of awareness in India now about ecology. This whole Ambani wedding that is happening, Vantara, huge support that's coming in terms of how we want to move forward for the next generation. So, from here, in terms of, once we're talking, we talked about why look at the elevator industry, let's look at why we should look at investment or foreign investment in India or in this particular sector. As far as the government is concerned, this is a snapshot from a digital platform that has been set up by the central government. The purpose of this digital platform is basically to ease the process of applying for approvals, any kind of government grants, tax breaks, anything that you need to start your businesses. The idea of the central government when it put up this digital platform is to ensure that all the information is available in one place and you can start doing your processes more easily and more transparently. So I'm not sure how many people are aware of it. So we thought, this is a good piece of information to share in this forum so that people are aware as to the options that the government has placed to kind of make business easier in India, especially the legal requirements in terms of approvals, what we call permits, licenses and approvals, whether it is to start your business or for, setting up an escalator, an elevator or managing it. And, we'll touch upon that in our last slide. Okay, the specific point that we would like to focus on in this presentation is talk about foreign investment coming into India. What is the legal regulations governing that? A lot of people are not aware of it, like in terms of how the law functions. So we thought it might be a useful piece of information to share as far as this forum is concerned, not just for, our foreign investors, but also for our Indian investors, so that people are aware in terms of where's the law coming from and what does the law say. So foreign investment in India, when you're looking at the law, it is primarily governed by the statute called the Foreign Exchange Management Act, which came into being in 1999. Before that, we had a different statute which was highly regulated. So when the country opened up, subsequent to that, that previous statute got repealed, and the act that is right now in force is the FEMA, what we call the FEMA or the Foreign Exchange Management Act. Now, under the FEMA, so the FEMA talks about a lot of things, and it is what we call a statute which is prohibitive. What that means is that unless the FEMA specifically permits you to do something, you are not permitted to do it. So in order for you to be able to do something, you have to find language in the FEMA that says you can do this. If you do not find that in the statute, that basically means that you are prohibited from doing it. Now the FEMA in itself, you will be very surprised, unlike the Companies Act, is a very small statute. It has, 50, 60 sections, but the devil always lies in the details, right? So what does the FEMA do? So FEMA basically turns around and says that the government has the power to basically set out how they want to, which are the sectors in which investment will come in, what are the conditions under which the investment will come in. So who is the relevant statutory authority? Because the FEMA basically says relevant statutory authority. So who is the relevant statutory authority? The relevant statutory authority is the Reserve Bank of India. So you will notice that any regulation that talks about FEMA, in the beginning, it will always say the Reserve Bank of India. And this is something that, generally, unless you're a lawyer who is practicing in this area, even lawyers who don't practice in this area don't understand it, because FEMA is extremely complicated to actually wrap your head around. But once you do, it's easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? So any regulation that comes out which relates to FEMA will always say the Reserve Bank of India. The reason is this, because the FEMA says statutory regulatory body, and the regulatory body is the FEMA. The FEMA sets out what are the regulations as far as foreign investment, as far as external commercial borrowings, whatever it is. Okay. Now, so when we look at foreign exchange, or when we look at investment, we're looking at foreigners, what is the statute that we go into? What is the law that we get into? The RBI has issued something known as the Consolidated Foreign Direct Investment Policy. Now, this is a comprehensive policy which came out in 2020, which is a voluminous one, but in that, it contains everything. What are the various options in which an investor who's coming into India, what are the permutations and combinations he can look at? Just an interesting point, we started our practice, like I said, Jayashree ma'am started her practice in the 80s. At that point of time, different statute, but 90s and 2000, what the RBI would do is that every week it would issue a regulation, right? And for us, the biggest challenge for those of us who are practicing this kind of law was to figure out what is the current position. What we updated on the law, what does that mean? Which is figure out where the latest RBI circular came from. And at that point of time, okay, today we have the Google and, RBI has come online. So these are government impetuses that they have done, which they have made everything online and easily accessible. But that was not always the case. It was most difficult for us to figure out what is the latest RBI position on a given point. Now, even in 2000, the 2012 till the statute came out, we would have multiple RBI regulations that talked about foreign direct investment. So for us, it was always, it's not just us. The reason I'm bringing this up is that most companies will have compliance issues under FEMA or under the RBI circular. The question is, what do you comply with? For that, you need to figure out where the law is. So it was a huge challenge because you always need to keep yourself updated in terms of where is the regulation coming from. The RBI, recognizing this difficulty, in 2020 brought out this consolidated FDI policy, and they got up and said, you know what, we're going to make life easier for you all. Here's one policy. This is the one-stop shop for you to look at. This is all that you need to take a look at. So, okay, to quickly run you through what the FDI policy talks about. So, the FDI policy, in the next 3 slides, we have got into how the FDI policy runs. Broadly, the FDI policy has what is known as permitted sectors and prohibited sectors. At one point of time in the early 2000s, the prohibited list was much more than the permitted list. But today, there are only 7-8 items which are there on the prohibited list, which is what we have put out in point number 2, which is things like, lottery, gambling, chit fund, manufacture of tobacco, certain, there are 8 items which are prohibited, in which there is no foreign direct investment that is permitted. You cannot have a foreign player. The good thing for us is that when it comes to lifts and manufacturing, it's a completely permitted sector, but I will get into that after I explain, what permitted and prohibited is. As we pointed out in the last point, if you're not falling under the prohibited, everything else is permitted and it's open for foreign investment. I don't know how many of you will recall, but I think in 2020 or so, Narendra Modi basically got up and the BJP government turned around and lifted a lot of restrictions that were there. And then there was a statement in the media that always said India is now one of the most open economies. What did that mean? That basically meant this, right? So, simple reference point, you have prohibited, you have permitted, unless you have some 8 things that you're doing, which is gambling and tobacco and all of that. Everything else, investment from outside is permitted. Right. Okay. So, just a quick snapshot, like on the last point we've said manufacturing sector comes under the automatic route. There's no prior approvals that is required from any government authority or any statutory authority. Now the question is, if you are permitted to bring in investment, what is the manner in which you can bring in? So the FDI policy, the consolidated FDI policy basically lists out 3 instruments through which you can bring in your investment. You can either have equity, you can have what is known as compulsory mandatorily convertible debentures, or what we call CCDs, and CCPS, which is again compulsorily mandatorily converted pref shares. What does this mean and why is this important? When you look at investment coming in to your company, you obviously want ways and means to control the management, because at the end of the day in a company you have your board and then you have your shareholders, which is where the power vests. So if you're going to give them a stake in your company, how do you give that stake? Depending on what the thought process is, these are the options you have, because if you give equity, then you give them voting power. If you give them CCPS, then you can control that, because you bring in the money and then you decide at what point of time it will convert, how it will convert, what is the ratio at which it will convert, what is the value at which it will convert. Similarly with CCDS, debentures directly, any debt instrument, you cannot bring in foreign investment as a debt instrument. That's covered under a different regulation, which is the external commercial borrowing. But as far as foreign direct investment is concerned, which is, investment into a company, not in the form of loans or borrowings, you can also look at an instrument called CCD. Now, I spoke about permitted and prohibited. Once you are falling under the permitted sector, so if you're under the prohibited, that's it, door shut there. The road stops there for you. But if you fall into the permitted sector, the one thing to just keep in mind broadly, although it doesn't apply in the lift sector, but in terms of just understanding how the law works, we have what is known as sectoral caps. For example, if you're looking at investment into defense, right, it might be 100% or it will be 74%. What does that mean? It basically means foreign investment is permitted up to a limit of 74% in that sector, whatever that sector is. And in addition, what they will turn around and say is that some sectors will also have certain additional conditions. Like for example, in 2005, when the real estate sector opened up for towns, all of these planned layouts, that approval that came from the Reserve Bank of India had certain specific, in addition to the sector, in addition to how much you can invest in that real estate sector, it also had certain terms and conditions, one of which was environment. Your project needs to clear a particular, what we call the EPA. You need to clear certain environmental considerations. So the government, depending on what kind of sector they are dealing with, they will turn around and tell you how much investment is permitted, and in addition to that, what are the other terms and conditions to keep in mind. This is just for you all to keep in mind, when you're reading the FDI policy, how it flows. One of the important things to keep in mind is section 5.2.15, which is basically talking about trading, because trading in India has been a very touchy factor. For example, when we were talking about the metro, we were the people who gave advice for metro in terms of how they bring in, it was a huge litigation, all of those things. What was the problem? The problem was multi-brand retail. The government basically said, I don't want you getting into multi-brand retail. And then there's been a lot of development after that, where today, if it's a single brand retail, you're permitted to do it. So as far as the elevator and escalator industry is concerned, we just thought that, this is because what are you looking at? You're either looking at manufacturing or you're looking at trading. So the question is, are you permitted, depending upon what kind of company you're dealing with? Manufacturing, 100%. As far as trading is concerned also, you fall into the 100% sector. So you are in the clear completely. Now, okay, you got somebody who's interested in investing in the country. How do you go about it? What is the vehicle you look at? So this is what we want to address in the next couple of slides, where, we are talking about, there are different ways. The FDI policy and the FEMA basically talks about different ways in which somebody who brings in money into the company, how they can do it. You have something known as a liaison office, you have something known as a branch office, which we will cover in the later slides. We are bringing it in the later slides because it's not very relevant for reasons that we will explain. So the general preferred mode is a limited liability company, which is what we call a private limited company. Why are we doing that? Because you basically have better control over the board. You are able to control the manner in which the investment comes in. You are able to control what is for the money that they are bringing in or you are bringing in as a OCI holder or an NRI. What is the take, or as far as the company is concerned, what is the give that you're going to give them? The preferred mode is company or a limited liability partnership. With the company, earlier regulations before we had the new Companies Act 2030 come in, it required minimum of 2 shareholders. Under the new Companies Act, even a single shareholder is sufficient. You can actually have a company in which there is only 1 shareholder. The only thing to keep in mind is that a company is required to have a minimum of 2 directors, out of which 1 has to be a resident Indian. That is the only requirement, but other than that, it's pretty much flexible. You have a very detailed statute, which is the Companies Act, which is tested and well put through the paces, which governs a limited liability company. The process of setting up a company is fairly simple. Generally, the entire process can get done in 15 to 20 days, provided you have your documentation in order. And what is that documentation? You need to have proper ID proof and you need to have a proper address proof. These are the only 2 things that are required. If you have these 2, setting up a company is as simple as a 15 to 20 day process. The biggest challenge that you will find in that entire process is to come up with a name. Because people normally come up with names, they're not very innovative about the name. So if you're one of those people who comes up with a cool, hip, innovative name, your biggest task in setting up a company is done. But if you come up with things that oh, like, let's go with, this is a common name, like, let's call it Saraswati, or let's call it, I don't know, Niyatha, then you will run into a little bit of a challenge, because there are other companies also. So that is what the registrar of companies will get up and say, that, there's already this company that has this name, or, this company, this name is being used as a trademark by somebody else. So the biggest challenge that you're going to face is not a legal thing. It's actually coming up with a unique name. So, we've listed out what the advantages are. Like I said, the other thing is, liability. Unlike a sole partnership, something goes wrong in a company, they can't come after you, because there is something known as a corporate veil. The company is distinct from its shareholders. There are very specific circumstances, and as far as the Supreme Court of this country is concerned, the law is well set. What are the circumstances under which the corporate veil can be lifted, and you can go after the individual shareholders. And the Supreme Court historically has been very clear as to what are the circumstances under which they will lift. It has to be exceptional, which I think is is actually a very strong indication of our legal system, because it's not like, a lot of the other, countries where the judicial system is probably governed by a lot of other external factors. Foreign companies, just to give a quick snapshot, you can either set it up as a wholly owned subsidiary here, you can set it up as a joint venture, you can set it up as a 80% Indian, 20% foreign. Again, it depends on what is the money that they are bringing in, what is it that they want in return, how have you given it? Have you given up stake in your company right up front, or do you want to get up and say, let's see if we can build a business, and if we build a business, then, in 15, 20 years, then, you will have so much at stake. You can take those decisions, those kind of structuring decisions based on tax, what the tax law is, and in order for you to take that decision, you can go back. That is why the FDI policy talks about the CCPS and the CCDs. It's not just an equity instrument that's there for you. Moving on very quickly into limited liability partnership. Again, this is this is again a new entity that, a kind of creature that has been brought in the last 10, 12 years. Earlier, you only had the Partnership Act. Now, because they wanted to give an option, just like a company, but you don't want to set up a company, you want to, you like the sound of partnership, you have the ability to set up what is known as a limited liability partnership. Broadly, mota, when you look at it, it's a lot like the company in the sense that, you can actually create a shield between the people who are partners and what the assets or liabilities. The biggest thing is liability as far as the partnership is concerned. Again, you have a statute specifically dedicated to this, which controls how a LLP is going to be, how it's going to operate, what are the compliances and stuff like that. The registration process is also simple, just like the company. Compliances are marginally less than the for a company. So it's really up to an investor to decide how they want to whether they want a company or they want an LLP. Very briefly, like I was saying, you can, when a foreigner comes up to set up a company, they can look at limited liability companies or partnerships. The other option that they have is what is known as a liaison office. The catch with the liaison office is, it's exactly what the name says. They can only liaison. They can't really carry out business. So they're just a rep of the foreign entity. The other option is your branch office. A branch office is slightly better than a liaison office in that it can actually undertake commercial activities, but it again doesn't have the kind of flexibility that a company or an LLP can do. But sometimes we have people who say that we want to come and test out the market, we don't really want to set up a company, we want to figure out what options are there. If you have somebody like that, this is definitely an option that can be given to them. Again, all the law here is governed by the consolidated FDI policy. Very briefly to touch upon this, this is just the gist of this PPT is to basically say that other than setting up a company and a limited liability partnership or a branch and a license, you can also do what is known as a tech collaboration. You can do technical collaboration agreements, you can do agreements which talks about IP transfer or payment of loyalty. But it's always advisable that you have documentation that captures what the terms and conditions is, because every time we have handled a litigation, the issue has come up basically because people have not thought through what we are going to do. So before you go through, in our legal process, what we do is, when people come to us, we start off with what is known as a term sheet. We say, you know, jot down what is there, or we call a MOU, Memorandum of Association, which can be binding or non-binding. You have that in place. At least if nothing else, you can put in a robust confidentiality clause there to ensure that whatever business ideas you come up with or you share, the information that you share, as far as Indians, understanding the market is concerned, you don't want them to take that information and go somewhere else. So you can build what is known as a robust confidentiality clause to make sure that you are not taken for a ride. Very quickly on this, when you set up a company and, you know, if you have somebody from abroad coming in and investing, this is useful information to provide them, which is that they can take the profit that they make in this country back to their country. How do you do that? You have 4 or 5 ways of doing it. Obviously, the standard is dividend, which, you know, everybody knows in terms of just general parlance, company has issued this amount of dividend. The other options you have is a buyback, you have a capital reduction, royalty payment. Like I said, you can do a tech collaboration where you get paid for services. If you do a branch or an liaison office, you can't repatriate the funds, which is basically why we always recommend that go with a company or a limited liability partnership, or get into a technical collaboration agreement where, you know, you set out how the profit thing is going to go. This is our last slide. Just want to touch upon the point saying that, you know, in a country as large as ours and as much of an investment opportunity and business opportunity that it provides, the government has come out with a statute. The central government has come out with a statute for regulating lifts and escalators, all mobility solutions. We have not got into details in this PPT simply because it's quite a comprehensive legislation, but most of the details in it are technical. The only legal requirement that is coming out of it is a registration requirement, depending upon what is the role that you are playing as far as the, you know, the lifts are concerned. Are you a manufacturer? Are you an operator? Are you an owner? Are you a builder? Depending upon what is the nature, there are certain registration requirements that is coming from the statute. Now, you have the central statute, and we have 10 states in the country which you have the mother statute. The states have basically enacted rules to it. Karnataka government has done something similar, where we have something known as the Karnataka Escalator rules, which has been enacted, which talks about these registration requirements. We thought, you know, this is a useful piece of information as far as this, you know, gathering is concerned. That's it. Have I taken more than 20 minutes? No? Good. So if you people have any questions, the organizers have our contact details. You can reach out if you want the statute. We're happy to, you know, point you in the right direction. Anything that we can help you with, we're not scary. I think we're quite fun. So yeah, look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you so much.
May I please call upon Anita ma'am to come for
Jump into the fire. I'd like to see your wild side. We should run away.
Thank you so much.
But the sun never goes down. Time has slowed down. Would it be too crazy if we
I thought I wouldn't be able
to stay forever? Decided to stay forever.
Thank you for that fantastic session, full of information, and she's available to answer your queries offline. So.